It's very generic, but if someone remembers leaving their water bottle, they're welcome to it. I think Natalie was one of the TFs told me that some of you in her section were a little bit confused by my regarding the doctrine of double effect. Confused by that was to sort of illustrate something which I may not have made entirely clear, which is why is euthanasia not killing the patient? I mean, why is it not murder? And this is, why would we permit euthanasia of any kind? And typically, regardless of the kind of euthanasia is invoked. So that long digression about the Spelunkin explorers and the trolley problem and all of like sort of blew by them was merely to be provided as the ethical justification for euthanasia, or not justification for why. The justification is we wish to help the patient, but the kind of explanation or ethical justification for euthanasia. Are there any other questions on that or anything else as usual? Any questions? We're going to be, we're almost done grading and processing the exams. We're going to post the grades on the exams later this week as soon as we're done totally checking everything. And then we'll be distributing, as soon as we do that, which I think we'll do on Thursday, we'll begin returning the exams immediately in sections. So if you have sections on Thursday afternoon or Friday and we've posted the grades already, then we'll just start returning the exams to you in sections. Okay. So last time, any questions about anything we've discussed so far? Oh, and actually I need to test one thing. Let me just before, because today I have sound. Let me just test this. Good. Okay, so last time we discussed the problem of medical harm, identifying different sorts of bad things that can happen to patients, and noting that iatrogenesis was a leading killer, in fact, in the top 10 killers in the United States. We discussed various ways of responding to this problem, focusing on the agency of both the patient and the doctor, and also focusing on the structure in which the patients and the doctors are embedded. And we reviewed various structural adjustments that reduce harm and error. We talked about some specific examples of sort of computerized systems that had been placed and other kinds of structural interventions that could be put into place to reduce the problem of medical harm. And finally, we talked about Ivan Illich's concept of social iatrogenesis. Now, we're switching gears. We're going to be speaking about health behaviors in individuals. And I want to open by asking you the following question. What does it mean to say that one thing is a cause of another? And this is an old question, of course, and here's what Aristotle had to say. Raise your hands if you've ever read about Aristotle's theories of causation. Had any instruction in that? Good, some of you have. Okay, so Aristotle said that there are 4 ways we can think about how A is a cause of B. We can think of something as being the material cause. We can think of something as being the formal cause, something as being the efficient cause, and something as being the final cause. So the material cause is that out of which a thing comes to be. For example, a sword is caused or arises because of the bronze that's used to make the sword. A formal cause is the statement of essence, the account of what it is to be. The efficient cause is the primary source of change. For example, the man who gives advice, or the parent of a child. And the final cause is the end, that for the sake of which the thing is done. For example, health is the cause of exercise. Or, if you were thinking about a table, which is the classic Aristotelian example, wood is what the table is made out of. It's the material cause. Having 4 legs and a flat top is what it is to be a table, this sort of formal cause. A carpenter is what produces a table, the efficient cause. And eating on and writing on is what the table is for, or the final cause. So we can think of the causes of death, what we've been considering so far in the course, in terms of whether they are the formal causes, what are the causes of death in our society, the disease itself being the formal cause, or the efficient causes, For example, let's say the risk factors for the outcomes of interest. So for example, on the left, let me see if I can find my pointer. So on the left is the usual list that we've been discussing so far in the class, the top 10 leading killers in the United States. And on the right is something new, something we haven't looked at before, which is the risks that may explain deaths in our society. And these risks on the death account for 1.225 million deaths every year in 2002, or roughly 50% of the deaths. So this list here includes, I think, something like 80% of all the deaths, or 75%. But seeing the causes of death differently, for example, tobacco is a cause of death in almost 500,000 people. 18% of Americans die of tobacco-related injuries. Diet and activity is a cause of death, lack of diet and poor activity. Alcohol kills about 5% of Americans, alcohol and related diseases, and so forth and so on. So now we can begin to think about the causes of death as totally different than the way we've been discussing it in the course so far. And these estimates on the right have been generated as much as possible to isolate the pure effect of each cause. And these causes can have additive or even synergistic effects. So being obese and alcoholic is multiplicatively worse than being either one of those two things. And all these exposures on the left have multifarious ways of killing us. Tobacco causes not just lung cancer, as is commonly known, but also causes head and neck and tongue cancer, for example, esophageal cancer, and bladder cancer. It does this because, of course, in our urine, as we're trying to excrete all the toxins, our urine concentrates all these carcinogens, and those carcinogens sit in a bath of your urine in your bladder for years and years and years as you smoke, and then causes bladder cancer, even though you inhale the tobacco smoke. And tobacco also causes coronary artery disease, and premature births, and neonatal deaths, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and pneumonia, and burns. People die every year from fires that are ignited by cigarettes. In fact, 3,000 people die every year in the United States from inhaling the smoke that other people exhale. So you exhale the smoke, I inhale it, 3,000 of us every year die in that sense of the word of causes. And it's a similar story with diet and exercise, the second item on the list. Suboptimal levels of diet and exercise cause cardiovascular disease, cancer, colon and breast cancer, and diabetes. And alcohol contributes to liver disease, motor vehicle accidents, digestive diseases, and even cancer. Environmental pollutants, food contamination, and exposures to commercial products also cause many deaths. And this particular line is likely to rise due to global warming and environmental degradation. There's an epidemic of people with serious lung disease in China right now because of the way China causes of death in China. You might say, oh, well, people are dying of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or pneumonia, but actually looked at it another way, they're dying of toxic agents that they're inhaling from the air, being, the fumes being produced by the factories and the development in China at the moment. And as for firearms, which is number 7 on the list, another epidemic which we'll discuss next time. So changing how we see the causes of death is different. Policy, our public policy posture with respect to reducing the burden of illness and disease and mortality in our society. We spend $900 billion in healthcare every year, but less than 5% is spent on prevention, is spent on addressing the causes of death as seen on the right rather than as seen on the left. So we are so focused on thinking of diseases and deaths as being caused by things on the left that we lose sight of the way in which they are caused by things on the right, and we allocate our spending accordingly. Today we're going to be discussing obesity and exercise and diet, and next time we're going to take up smoking and firearms. So let's start by getting a handle on what different sorts of body mass indexes, or BMIs, look like. BMI is your weight in kilograms divided by your height expressed in meters squared, which is meant to capture your body surface area. So here is what a woman, these women all have a height of 5'6", and this is what a 124-pound woman looks like. Her BMI is 20, it's normal. Here's a BMI of 23. She weighs 143 pounds. Here's a BMI of 25. She's on the cusp of being overweight at this body size. These are clinical standards, not my opinion. And so she's 155 pounds at 5'6". Now she's obese at a BMI of 30. And then now she becomes morbidly obese. This is what a 5'6" woman that weighs 248 pounds will have a BMI of 40 looks like. Just to get a handle on what we're talking about when we're speaking about body mass index and different thresholds. So 25 and above is considered overweight. 30 and above is considered obese. And for the guys, here's what it looks like. So here's this guy here. He's a 6'1" guy. His body size is 151. His BMI is 20. And here he is at 23. Here's 25. He's on the cusp of being overweight at a body size of 189. This guy's not a particularly muscular guy, as you can see. His BMI here now, he's obese at 227 and morbidly obese at 303, filling out in that way. In fact, you can go online now and create little avatars of yourself if you want and play around with body, put in your height and your picture and stuff like that. And actually you can create avatars that you can shop for clothes for and kind of pre-fit the clothes using these kinds of avatars. And this slide shows the percentage of people who are obese, whose body mass index is above 30, by sex and race and by time period. So this shows the percentage of Americans who are obese by race and ethnicity from 1971 to 2002. So these are different time periods. So for example, in 1971, 13.9% of white women were obese, and 11.9% of white men were obese. 28.5% of black women were obese, and 14.9% of black men were obese in 1971. We're going to add the Mexican men and women later on. And as you come forward in time, you see that now 30.6% of white women have a BMI of above 30, are obese, and now more than half of black women have a BMI above 30, are technically obese, which is a big increase in the last 30 years. Here's a situation with white men. Black men have not increased as much, and here's a situation amongst Mexican women and Mexican men. So there's variation across gender, race and ethnicity, and across time. And men are less likely to be obese than women, and whites are less likely to be obese or Mexican Americans. And this obesity is increasing across time, and in fact, it's more than doubled since 1970. And indeed, if you take into account overweight and not just obesity, now obese or overweight. Raise your hands if you've ever seen a picture of World War II military conscripts in the United States waiting to get in line to be conscripted. Have an image like that, a black and white picture of men waiting in line in the 1940s or 1950s? They look like these scrawny guys. Have you ever seen military conscripts photos now of soldiers now? Totally different physiognomy. These guys look different now than they did even a generation or two ago. So fully 2/3 of Americans are overweight or obese at the present time. And this reports the same numbers as I just showed you by body mass index. So 0.4 in this time period, 1971. Average black woman has a BMI of 31. So the average woman is obese, not just overweight, according to clinical standards. Here's a situation with white men and so forth. And they're old data, but the population distribution of weight, in fact, keeps shifting to the right across the whole distribution. So now if you look at the proportion of people having different body mass indexes, and you plot it in this fashion, so now in the moment ago I just showed you the means, now I'm going to show you the whole distributions. This is old data from 2003, so it projected 2008. In fact, 2008 looks something like that. Distribution keep uniformly shifting to the right. Shift that we saw in BMI, in blood pressure that we saw a few lectures ago. So it's not that a small group of Americans is very fat, pulling the average up. It's that all Americans at every point in the distribution are shifting to the right and gaining weight. So the whole thing is a few lectures ago. And people are getting so big that hospitals are having to make all kinds of adjustments. Chairs and hoists and special CT scanners, enormous CT scanners that are big enough for 500-pound people to fit in with big openings be constructed. Gurneys that can transport people that are 3 or 4 or 500 pounds need to be developed so that they be adjusted and rethought. You know, when you had a condition, I learned how to treat it, I learned the proper dosing, but actually if you're twice the size, you may need twice the drug. And some probably learn. So physicians, the body size of America, the needles have to get longer. When I open the drawer to get needles, they'd be this big. Now they're like this big because you have to go through layers of fat to get into the patient's vein. So you need these longer, bigger needles. Care delivery system. In fact, there are thousands of workplace injuries in hospital workers each year just for moving overweight patients. So these two women are designed for a single person, a single very large person, and on the right is an illustration that can't move her, so special hoists are needed in order to transport this patient from a bed to chair and so forth. Here's a special gurney that's being invested. This frame has been designed to support up to 1,600 pounds. This very specially designed, mechanically optimized for patients, you know, when they're in crisis outside of the hospital, into the hospital. Time. On gender. X-axis in this slide is something known as the poverty-income ratio, or a measure of socioeconomic status. It's a standardized measure of income. And on the y-axis is the body mass index. So here is the BMI, and here is the poverty-income ratio. So these are poorer people, and these are richer people on the far right. And these show different time periods that have been measured. So for example, the relationship between wealth and BMI, so the poorer you are, the heavier you are in the first time period, which is 1971, and the slope is negative, is declining. So the richer you are, the less likely you are to be obese. And this relationship was virtually identical in a time period, 5 years later, and then takes a big step up between 1980 and 1988. So everyone gets heavier, but the negative relationship still persists, such that richer people are thinner. And then again, I don't know how many years later that is, another 5 or 10 years later, it takes another step up, but the negative relationship still persists. So that the richer you are, but the X plus B, B is staying roughly the same, M is staying roughly the same, but B keeps shifting up as time goes along. Yeah.
What explains the curve?
It's a fitted, it has to do with the way the arrow was fitted and smooth. It's not very important. Yeah.
Would this have been reversed about?
I'm sorry, let me try. One possible explanation, if it were real, was that very poor people are actually thinner because they're starving. They don't have enough food. But I don't think that's what's actually happening here. If you went to, yeah. Yes, I'm sorry?
Would this have been reversed about a century ago? Because when it was seen?
Maybe. And of course, if you go to a place like Bangladesh, being obese is seen as a huge luxury, right? In a place that's very poor. I don't know what it was like a century ago. There's certainly anecdotally, like in the Robber Baron, those cartoons you've seen of fat cats, wealthy guys that are big obese guys. That's the cartoons. The white guys typically, they're smoking cigars and stuff. So that's how typical that was. But that may have been the kind of norm, the kind of stereotype. Other questions? So this slide shows that among white women, the richer you are, the thinner you are. However, the set point for the relationship is changing across time. And in fact, a rich white woman today is as obese as a poor white woman in 1971. So here's a rich white woman today, and her obesity level is she's about as obese, not exactly, but nearly as obese as a poor white woman was 30. This is another way to appreciate, and the big leap seems to have occurred in the 1980s. Excuse me. This is another way to appreciate that we are in the midst of an epidemic that is affecting all sectors of our society, men and women, black and white, rich and poor, uniformly, not uniformly, but consistently, everybody is being affected by this epidemic. For men, the curves are flatter, if not flat. So for men, there's less of a relationship between how wealthy you are and how obese you are, how heavy you are. But the set point has also been rising across time in these data, with everyone weight. Now, how might wealth and health and weight, wealth and weight, be related? As usual, the relationship could go one way, both ways, some third way, or all of the above. So for example, one possibility is that income contributes to weight status because more resources enable better diet, more leisure time, and places for exercise, a better feeling of self-efficacy. If you're richer, you might feel more powerful, more able to control your destiny. You might also imagine that you have more fun to have later on in your life, so why eat now? Why take a quick pleasure in eating? Why not forecast the future, your further enjoyment? Whereas if you're poor, you figure, who knows what the future holds? Might as well just eat a lot right now and get the goods while I can. Discounting of your expected utility. Or there could be variation in aesthetic norms and expectations that may explain this. What beautiful bodies look like than poor people. And in your readings for today, you will have seen a very powerful and vivid example of that. Alternatively, could go the other way. Income. Here the idea is that there might be different labor and marriage market performance of different people of different weight status. Maybe if you're heavier, you're less able to get a wealthy partner. Or a nice partner even, or maybe you're paid less in the workplace. We know that there's discrimination against people who are unattractive. So for example, if resumes, but photographs of different people of different levels of attractiveness, they'll offer higher wages to people who are paid for a pretty wage. Speaking. Or there could be discriminatory factors at place whereby people might discriminate for wrong with different sorts of body sizes. Or there could be finally some common factor, maybe something in your genes or something in your personality traits that makes you both. Weight status might co-vary, not because they're causally related to each other, but because some third factor causes both of them simultaneously, in a way we discussed a few lectures ago. And here's some suggestive evidence that the relationship can indeed go from body mass index to income. This slide shows the effect of overweight in adolescence on subsequent socioeconomic characteristics among men. And the data are from a nationally representative sample of over 10,000 randomly selected young people who were between 16 and 24 years old in 1981. And follow-up data were obtained in 1988. And the characteristics of the subject who had been overweight in 1981 were compared with the characteristics of those for young people with asthma, musculoskeletal abnormalities, and other chronic health conditions. And men who had been overweight were less likely to be married. They were 11% less likely, and they also earned less and were less likely to have completed college. So here this shows these various traits. So this is fraction married among the overweight adolescents. 40% were married at follow-up compared to the non-overweight. 48% were married. The household income amongst the overweight was $26,000. The non-overweight were earning $5,000 more even 7 years later in this young sample, and so forth. The amount of education completed, the probability of completing college. Overweight kids, 10% completed college. Non-overweight kids, 23% completed college. And here's the crude estimate, and this is after adjustment for a variety of other confounders and the relative p-values for which of these are statistically significant and which are not. Yes, Shona. Yeah, probably did in the paper. Yeah, at baseline SES. There are people who had other chronic conditions like in these ways from non-overweight, from people who lack condition. So obesity, for example, of asthma. Interestingly, in this study that was conducted in the mid-1980s, there was no evidence of an effect of overweight on self-esteem. So think ill of themselves. Now, the second paper I think is especially interesting. Overweight men, in general, tend to tolerate their weight. And in fact, it turns out there's a notable lack of correspondence and objective and women. This shows the lack of correspondence between subjective and objective assessments of weight status. So this is what people think about themselves. Are they overweight, just right, or underweight? And this is the medical standard, whether they are overweight, normal, or... And on the are just right and are normal, etc. But here are all kinds of other people. These are all people who those people might be overweight by medical standards, and they think they're just fine. Weight. I'm great. I'm nothing at all wrong with my weight status. So about 20% weight are overweight, think they are not. And the discordance of self-evaluation with respect to medical standards actually not homogeneously distributed. Compared to men, women are almost 5 times more likely to overassess their body size. And those who are young, white, and wealthier or more educated are also more likely to overassess their weight status. Norms regarding acceptable body type are in fact socially patterned. Yes, but ideas about weight that also vary by socioeconomic status. Body size, you see, is also socially constructed, just like some of the other things that we've been discussing, and as you can see in one of your readings for today. Now, being obese and overweight, actually, this is somewhat debated, but I believe the consensus that it's bad for your health, and that it actually we can find a mortality signature of being obese or overweight. About 31%. This slide, which was also taken from your readings, shows the year of life compared to being sedentary. So it shows the added life from an active lifestyle in men up to the age of 80, estimated from a Harvard alumni sample from 1962 to 1978. So at the age at entry, this was the whole sample here, and this is added life from an active lifestyle in men up to the age of 80, and so they gained an average of about, I forgot what this is measured in. Hold on, let me look at my notes here. I can't remember if I think it's either 2 years or 2 months. Say that again? Yeah, I was trying to remember if it was months or years. Do you remember, is it years? Because 2 years seems like a lot, but it could be 2 years. So this is the adjusted, these are comparing the extremes. That's why. So this is the physical activity index. So comparing those who are most active to those who are the least active, thank you, that comparison yields an extra 2 years of life expectancy. Yeah, estimated number of years gained. Thank you. So if you compare the most active to the least active, after adjustment for other observed factors, you gain about 2.15 years. And there are other comparisons that are illustrated in the data. So these data the harms of not exercising. They quantify the harm by suggesting that climbing less than 20 flights of stairs per week, or 3 flights a day, so if you climb less than 3 flights a day of stairs compared to more than 3 flights, it's associated with a 23% increase in your risk of death. So just climbing an extra and materially lower your risk of death in this sample of men from a previous generation. Now this quantification of the effect led to some exchanges in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is one of the most elite journals of medicine, afterwards, because the critics noted that climbing 3 flights of stairs per day took about 60 seconds, and it lengthened your life by about 3 months. But that if you did the calculation, you actually spent these 3 months climbing stairs. So people, but it actually raises some interesting philosophical questions about why, if you could do something that would extend your life, but that required the approximately equal amount of time, would you do it? What would be the reasons for that? Let's say I told you you could do something right now that would take you 3 months, but you would live 3 months longer. Why might you choose to do that? Yeah. Okay, so let's just say you're right. You might not only get a length of life benefit, but you might have a higher quality of life. But I want a pure play now. So you can do something that'll take you 3 months. 3 months, you'll gain an extra 3 months at the end of your life. Why might you choose to do it?
You're still living during those 3 months.
Yes, you're still deriving some benefit from living. That's right. Very good. Why another reason? Yeah?
So sometimes you can do like more than one thing at once. First of all, like climbing stairs, you could also like be thinking of things that are unfolding in something else. And also, like we're likely to waste some time every day doing things we like don't care about doing anyway, so it's better to take a small amount of time every day.
Okay, that's a good argument, a replacement effect. You're saying you're going to waste the time anyway. Why not do something with time you otherwise would waste and now gain those 3 months? I get that argument, yeah? In a minute, I'm going to ask you why you wouldn't want to do that, yeah?
If we're looking at like
That's Layla, right?
if we're looking at the social benefits of like living, as we've been talking about in the past, and sort of those social networks, you can do this stuff with friends. You can walk stairs with friends, and you can spend more time living those 3 months with people that you love.
So you can derive the benefits, but let's say I make a really perfect example and I say I'm going to take you, you can hit a pause button, I'm going to take you to a prison for 3 months. And you can do nothing there but look at the walls for 3 months, and then I'm going to tack those 3 months on at the end of your life. What would you gain by that? Well, one thing you might gain by that is you might live long enough to see something that will occur 80 years from now. Okay, so for example, if I'm waiting around to see if people land on Mars, I might really want those 3 months 50 years from now and not care about them so much now. Or conversely, what might be the reason you don't want to climb the stairs every day? Yes, you might believe as a 20-year-old that a month as an 80-year-old. That the utility you, the same human being, Rachel, right, derive right now is derived from having a month today than later. So people make complex intertemporal assessments of benefits to themselves. Anyway, that was a snarky kind of exchange, but raises interesting philosophical questions about this type of study. But people who smoke avidly, some people who've thought about it might even tell you, I am willing to take the risk of for the satisfaction of smoking now. And when they actually say it that way, I get slack-jawed. What can you say to them? You're like, that's stupid. But, that's their decision at some point, in some perspective. From an agency point of view, we might say that's what they choose to do. Now, other work, however, different than the Pfaffenberger paper, how overweight and obesity per se raise the risk of death. It depends on whether you are merely overweight or properly obese, how obese you are, what the and how old you are. Of death primarily through its effect on cardiovascular disease. And the risk may only rise substantially when your BMI is actually above 30, according to some very recent work. So just being overweight may cause other problems for you, but may not actually increase your risk of death or your risk of cardiovascular disease until it crosses this higher threshold. If any effect on risk of all cancers combined. It has some effect clearly on cardiovascular disease, but maybe not on. Obesity does not kill you, of ways, such as its effect on disability. So here, if you look at relative risk of cause-specific mortality by body mass index, this is cardiovascular disease, and here's what happens as you get bigger and bigger. Among 25 to 59-year-olds, roughly your risk of cardiovascular disease, monotonically increases. It's not monotonic exactly because of that point, but roughly just increases, both among younger people and among older people. but it's a more pronounced increase among younger people. But among cancer, it's kind of flat. Bigger and bigger you are, it doesn't result in increased risk of mortality from cancer, either among the young or among the old, at least as shown in this study. Now, obesity is not just an individual. At the population level, a BMI of 30 results in a life expectancy at birth. So overall, if I told you at birth could also being on average 3 months of your life off, and a BMI of 35, looking back at the pictures that we saw at the beginning, United States population in 2000. Our usual concern about how to understand the problem from a collective or an individual perspective in terms of structure or agency or both. Numerous environmental factors are important in explaining the obesity epidemic. So why? Why do we have an epidemic now of obesity in the United States? Well, point that a few years ago in the 1980s, as more and more Americans became heavy, we started looking around and we reset our ideas about what an acceptable body. I gain, you gain more weight, and we're all just affecting each other by ideas, just like a fashion, like hemlines might go up or down, and the width of ties might exclusive these situations. To the invention and propagation of labor-saving devices, sedentary entertainment options, even amongst college students. You guys are hanging out in your dorm rooms playing Xbox and other kinds of Frisbee. That's not a good choice, just so you know. There are reliance on motorized transportation, suburbanization, like Europeans do from place to place. Very dramatically over the last 100 years. So Americans, taking the number, but Americans like 100 years ago might have spent 30% of their disposable income on food. Now Americans might spend 10%. I made up those, it's something like that. There are increased portion sizes, food advertising and fast food availability, other social changes like working mothers. So the return of women to the labor force was great from a number of points of view, but was worse from the point of view of food preparation in the home. It declined smoking. So when you smoke, tight, so often like people will smoke in order to remain thinner. As we've stopped smoking in our society, maybe that good news is contributing to the bad news of people gaining weight. And finally, there could be other sorts of changes, for example, in the microbiome, in the kinds of bacteria at the population level. And these may be related to the content of our food. Intestines, hospitable to different sorts of bacteria, and those different flora in our guts help us digest foods. More widespread, maybe we are radically changing the nature of germs inside our guts, which also could be contributing to. Cells are not changing over the last 100 or 30 years, although we'll discuss this topic later as well. So the reason for the obesity epidemic is not because of your genes. It's got to do something with the physical and social environment is the cause of the obesity epidemic. Some hint of the role of both social norms and environmental factors can be seen in the geographic patterning of the obesity epidemic. So this shows the percentage of state inhabitants that are obese is greater than 36% are obese, and the blue are 1990, you get this pattern. 10 years later, obesity is rising, but some states more than others. Spots of obesity, the kind of culture of different states, different parts of the country. And Mississippi, in fact, had first status in terms of counties in Michigan, in Mississippi, have obesity prevalence in adults close to 40%. Nearly half of all adults in those counties are obese, not just overweight. And norms are changing. In fact, in 1980, less attractive than others. So in 1985, over half of Americans said not so attractive. But in 2005, 20 years later, half as many, 24% of Americans said they found obese people less attractive. So our ideas about appearance are changing size. Social norms, in fact, changing to the point where there is an association to advance fat acceptance that frames its claims in terms of civil rights. For example, here are some photos from clicking on the URL for the 2005 NAFA convention. The National Association for the Advanced Fat Acceptance, they have all kinds of links here, and here's their annual convention from 2005, and here's this woman in this pink bikini. And it's a very complicated phenomenon when you look at this type of image, because we are strongly opposed to discrimination and hatred and victim blaming on the one hand, and should be mindful of our common humanity. We're all people, after all, and so we should be opposed to discrimination and hatred and victim blaming by body size. On the other hand, norms is harmful to public health. I mean, how can it be a good thing to glorify this state of affairs? So it's very confusing, actually, for me and for others who are thinking in this area. Because to say there's something size, on the other hand, we do want to say there's something wrong about being this size. So it's not easy or point of view. Contended that it's norms, plentiful supply of industry with encouraging government policies and agricultural subsidies that are dumped on the market, and that this is what is to blame. So for example, on the left, here is why does a salad cost so much more than a Big Mac? Here are federal subsidies for food production. So we provide enormous subsidies for political reasons for the production of meat and dairy products, grains, and very few for the production of vegetables and fruits. And here on the right are from our same federal government the nutrition recommendations, which are completely the reverse of that. So we say it's important to have fruits and vegetables, but financial incentives for the production of fruits and vegetables, we provide financial incentives, all kinds of tax benefits which distort the real price of foods to dairy products, as shown on the bottom. And these calories that are then produced, abetted by our government policies, actually have to be eaten by someone and may wind up contributing to the obesity epidemic. And this is one of the arguments that Marion Nestle makes in her very compelling book, Food Politics. And these types of effects are actually not true. Even a slight average calorie intake can have huge population level effects. So this shows roles per day. Median of the distribution of estimated energy accounts for the observed weight gain of about 2 pounds per year in Americans 20 to 40 years old, can be ascribed to an excess consumption of just 15 calories per day. So this means that an intervention by 50 calories per day, which corresponds to a reduction in food intake of 100, which corresponds to a reduction in food intake of just about half a candy bar per day, would offset the weight gain in 90% of the population. So if I could go out and persuade Americans to just eat a little bit less, equivalent to half a candy bar per day, I could reverse the obesity epidemic. That's how small a difference per day in this population it takes to result in a 2 pounds per year weight gain in Americans in our society. So the obesity epidemic arises from the consumption of less than half a candy bar extra per day. It's a balance in this case, so it's an excess. So if I could get everyone to exert themselves by whatever it was, 3 flights of stairs per day, as I discussed earlier, that might be enough to burn an extra 50 calories or persuade them to walk or do something else. But generally speaking, it's much easier to lose weight. In fact, when you're thinking of weight gain, it's hard to exercise your way to a normal weight. You have to eat less, period, and consume fewer calories. Questions? And portion size. So we've talked about norms, we've talked about government subsidies. Portion size is also a problem. This is something taken from the National Geographic. So this shows like what a Burger King hamburger looked like in 1954 and in 2004. And this is a McDonald's French fries. In 1959, when you ordered fries, you got 2.4 ounces. They were 200 calories. Now you get 7 ounces, 600 calories. Here's a Hershey bar in 1900, 2 ounces. Now, 7 ounces. Here's a Coca-Cola in 1916 versus today. Here's a movie popcorn in the 1950s. You get about 3 cups. Now you get 21 cups of buttered popcorn. So if you ordered popcorn in the movie theater in 1950s, it was 174 calories. Now it's 1,700 calories to have this popcorn. You sit there munching popcorn in the movie theater. You consume what is the in the United States, let alone in the developing world. Yeah.
Are people, I don't understand, are people just able to eat more now, or?
No, we're getting bigger.
So they're just, okay, but.
We are eating more, and so we're bigger. And it's just, when you just order a hamburger, it comes big, and, you just eat it. That's the argument. Yeah, you were going to say?
No, I forgot.
No, I didn't mean, no, I'll give you a second. I'll take another question.
Then what leads to the increasing portion sizes?
So that's a good question. So is it that we're demanding bigger portion sizes? Is there kind of restaurants that offer bigger portion sizes, get more customers? Is it supply and demand, or do they offer them and charge more? It's both is what's actually going on. Yeah.
How much of weight is driven by genetic factors, like I guess metabolism or appetite?
So some inter-individual variation in BMI, I think about 20% of the variation between individuals in that neighborhood, it's 10 to 30%, is explained by genetic differences in individuals. But that can't explain the obesity epidemic, right? Our genes haven't changed in the last 30 to 100 years. We'll come back to genetic change in human populations in historical time in a few lectures, but that's not what's causing the epidemic. It's other stuff is going on. Yeah.
I'm sorry if this is a stupid question.
There's never a stupid question.
Why don't people get full, right?
Yeah, so what happens is satiety takes a while. You must have noticed, if you can train yourself to eat slowly, so you eat one piece of pizza and then look at you wait 10 minutes, that's still longer, I'll have another piece, you eat it, and then but actually you notice that if you eat quickly, you can probably consume 4 slices in the first 10 minutes and still not feel sated by the end. So how do you acquire bigger, your body resets both the nerve cells in your stomach that detect the distension of your stomach get acclimated to a bigger stomach capacity, and your mind changes. When my brother, who was also a Yaley, his roommates developed, I don't know how you guys share pizza among your roommates. You order pizza. What is your heuristic for sharing pizza? You order pizza, comes to your room. How are you going to share it? 2 slices each. So fair, 2 slices each. Okay, that's one way. How else might you share it? First come, first serve. Another old time and tested heuristic. Other ways? Well, so what Dimitri and his roommates decided was whoever would eat the fastest would get the most pizza. So there was like, here's the pizza, start eating. And if you run out of pizza, you're out. Okay, well, you can eat a lot before you decide. So that's why. Other questions? Yeah, you remembered oh yeah. What's your name?
I'm Chelsea.
Chelsea,
So BMI is measured by weight over height. Is that what it says?
Weight over height squared in meters, yeah?
So that's not a very accurate representation of obesity, right?
Best one we have. There are men and Olympic athletes who are men, for example, very muscular men could have a very high BMI, but they're very high lean body mass. So if we could measure your lean body mass by submersing you in water or doing, there's a certain kind of way we can pass an electric current through your body and quantify those would be superior, but they're calibrated pretty good to this measure. So it's hard if your BMI is above 30 and you're like, well, I'm just a muscular guy, you know, probably not. Actually, you might be, but you know, probably not. You know, it's like the Olympic athletes. I forgot Phelps. I forgot Phelps' first name, the swimmer, Michael Phelps. So I saw like when he was in the Olympics 2 or 4 years ago, whatever it was, the New York Times had a thing on what the Olympic athletes were eating. People like that actually have a problem taking in enough calories. He would eat like 2 dozen glazed donuts in the morning before he went out swimming because he needed the energy, literally, because he needed fuel. And you know, he was eating, I think, like 10,000 calories a day. And of course, he's, you know, has no fat mass. We'll take more questions in a moment. Kinds of interventions or changes that we could make at individual and obesity epidemic. We could attack interventions, or at the interpersonal level, targeting social norms and networks. We'll come back to networks in a few lectures. Or at the organizational and environmental level, looking at schools and workplaces, and hospitals. Or at the community level, looking at structural changes or advocacy. Or at the policy level, looking at laws and regulations. And it's clear that things can change. Just look at the decline in smoking we've seen. For example, 45% of adults were smokers in 1965 and 23% in 2001. So having the number of smokers in 25 or so years, 30 years, and there have been a cultural shift in our attitudes towards smoking. We no longer think smoking is normatively okay. We think there's something wrong with smoking. People can't smoke indoors, et cetera, et cetera. And look at the change in sexual behaviors prompted by the HIV epidemic. There are condoms in every laundry room in many colleges. Is that the case here at Yale too? I don't know. Yeah, so at Harvard that was the case. It was a house. And I used to sometimes go, well, the exercise room was right across from the laundry room, and I would go in, I would look, oh, it's full of condoms today. I come back tomorrow, they're all gone. So I'd be wondering, you know, what's going on in my house there. But, you know, you could track sexual activity by the consumption of condoms. Or the fact that drunk driving laws are working to some extent. So there were 30% of fatal crashes involved drunk drivers in 1982, and now, after the Mothers Against Drunk Driving and attitudes towards the acceptability of drinking and driving, fewer than 17% are now involved drunk driving. So things can change. We can pass laws that change population level behavior and constrain individual agency. And in fact, many laws have been passed under consideration to combat the obesity epidemic. For example, by focusing on schools, including restricting access to sodas and other high-calorie, low-nutritive foods. So one has to wonder why with these particular vending machines. Now, an appropriate target is also school lunches, and not just because they are lousy. What meals are? Raise your hand if you went to a public school or a private school, or some private schools serve the same kind of things. Okay, so you should recognize all of these lunches as far as I'm concerned, okay? So, you know, what is this one here? These are, yeah, okay, and here's Franks and beans, and I don't know what that must be. What's that? A sauerkraut, okay. And what's this here? Mac and cheese and beans, exactly, and I don't know what that thing is there. And here's some chocolate milk, and I shudder, what could this be? Rice and chicken. Spoken like a real aficionado, you know, like, so you can recognize all of these meals. They're like, here's some tacos, you know, I mean, it's predictable, okay? And these are not nutritious, good meals. These are the school lunches in Japan. Who can tell me what these are? Raise your hands if you know what these are. Yeah. Yes. And here? This was right. You called this one. This is some kind of... Okay, but it's better, okay? Whatever it is, it's better than what you had. This is not as good for you as this, I can assure you. People have been contemplating passing to try to constrain people's eating habits at this stage of life. So this is state legislative initiatives to combat obesity. So, for example, physical education, and so this shows the number of enacted, pending, and introduced but not adopted pieces of legislation. This was in your readings. Physical education requirements and funding, nutrition education requirements and funding, vending machine restrictions, nutritional standards for cafeteria, outreach to parents, and so forth. All kinds of laws we can pass to try to change how, at the structural level, to change these kinds of things. And the law can be very effective, as we will see next time, to a greater extent with respect to smoking. But laws have also reduced our exposure to toxic lead, improved car safety and reduced motor vehicle accidents, increased vaccination rates, reduced occupational fatalities. So laws can save lives and can improve public health. And legislative efforts have also focused at the community level, not just the school level. So here's some community level interventions. What can we do outside of schools? Laws related to the creation of task force or institute, commissions for study, taxation of non-nutritious foods. Maybe we can tax foods differently. Improve safety for walking and biking. Let's make it easier for people to exercise by passing laws that make that easier, bike lanes and so forth. Attractive places for outdoor exercises, advertising restrictions, lots of different things we can do at the community level that might help people to be healthier. And in fact, there was a bill filed in 2008 in the Mississippi State Legislature, apparently because the legislature was motivated by the first-in-nation status of Mississippi, and it was, quote, an act to prohibit certain food establishments from serving food to any person who is obese based on criteria prescribed by the State Department of Health. Whoa. Is that going too far? Yeah, so I'll let you guys debate that in section. What's the difference between that law and all the other laws that a moment ago, to me, and I think to you, seemed like good ideas? And what about Michael Bloomberg's, or sorry, not Michael, Mayor Bloomberg's, yeah, Michael Bloomberg's recent initiative in New York City regarding the size of sodas? There was a proposal to limit the soft drink size in March of 2013, and the law passed by 8 members of the city's health board was intended to prohibit the sale of many sweetened drinks more than 16 ounces, which is huge in size. And under the plan, all restaurants, fast food joints, delis, movie theaters, sports stadiums, and so forth would be barred from selling sugar-sweetened drinks in cups larger than 16 ounces. And the plan fell through due to an invalidation by a New York Supreme Court judge, but the city is appealing. Now, sometimes legal interventions have been supplemented, an idea that I want to introduce today and that I'll return to next time, known as counter-marketing campaigns. So here's an example of a counter-marketing campaign. Start using marketing tools to try to change people's behavior, just like we use marketing tools to get people to buy more widgets and buy more iPads and more products and buy more, fast food and stuff. Let's use the same tools to actually try to change people's behavior for the better. The problem, unfortunately, is that this is just a drop in the bucket, because right below here is another billboard, McDonald's, my kind of shopping spree, and she has 2 big bags of food right below the other one. Yet the documentary Supersize Me, raise your hands if you saw this documentary. Great, yeah, so illustrates how effective. If you saw that, what was the grossest thing in that movie? Raise your hands. Yeah? Yeah, that grossed me out so much. Nothing they were there for like 2 years and the fries didn't change. In fact, if you've ever been asked by your parents, raise your hands if you've been asked by your parents to clean out your car. Oh, Jesus Christ, that's terrible. You should all be going, yes, I've cleaned out my parents' car. You should call them and say, I didn't clean out the car enough. If you had that job, as I did, you would often find McDonald's French fries in the car that had been there for 2 or 3 years. And they were unchanged. You wouldn't eat them, of course, but they'd be unchanged. So that really grossed me out. That happened to this guy? Who remembers? Yeah, he was throwing up, but within a month he was becoming impotent, right? He couldn't get an erection anymore, and his liver function tests were changing within a month of eating exclusively McDonald's foods. So this movie premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2004, and less than 2 months later, McDonald's announced that it would no longer sell any of their menu items in super size, although they officially deny that this move was in reaction to this film. Now, and if in fact this is another example of counter-marketing, an image like this, right? Why is this image effective? Who studies these kinds of things? Effective. Yeah?
Because we're all so familiar with the traditional David image, and we see it as beautiful, and it's been seen as beautiful for so long, and so it's very apparent.
Yeah, it's apparent, it's shocking. It twists like unexpected thing that it does to you. And here at the bottom it says if you don't move, you get fat. And here's, you know, now transitioning to a different body size. Pretty effective, right? You know, and it gets your attention. This is a comedy ad, you know, the other guys are properly equipped for the activity they're engaged in. The guy in the middle lacks protection and, you know, should be using a condom in this type of a situation. So I want to show you just 2 short videos that illustrate counter-marketing. I want you to pay attention to these, and then we'll pick up with smoking next time. So this is one, in my eye, in addition to laws, the passage of legislation, which has the kinds of effects that were discussed in the Milo article, to my eye, one of the lightest touches and likely most effective ways to change population-level human behavior will be through counter-marketing campaigns that are very clever and much better funded and much broader. So here's an example for one related to schooling. Okay, why? Some of you had seen this already, I could tell, right? You were hiding your eyes. Well, the first time I saw it, I was like, where are they going with this? And it's so appealing. And then, oh my God. So why is that effective? Raise your hands. Why is that effective? Yeah. Yeah, it's very shocking, right? You'll probably all be thinking about this, and probably 10 years from now, you'll be like, yeah, I had this professor in college, and you know, whatever else he did, I remember that video. So it's, again, picking up on the, what was your name? Hannah. What Hannah said, there's a contrast that's cultivated here. It's like the joke element, right? A contrast between the incredibly sweet, appealing, they're physically fit young people going to the beach and surfing, and they're cutting school, which is delicious. And, you know, and then they're being blown to smithereens, right? And it's very shocking. And so you get the message. Now, experts will disagree. Definitely a feature of counter-marketing. Okay, here's another one. This has a totally different and much more health-related. This one is a kind of stay-in-school message. The next one is a more health-related message. And it's even spawned, after this public service announcement, this is, was done in Australia originally, it even then spawned video games and like apps and so forth that you can buy. So some of you may have seen this. Here we go.
Set fire.
Unbelievable, isn't it? Why is this effect? You know, this has been seen, I think, tens of millions. Melbourne, for small amounts of money, has had a huge impact, and now there are apps you can get and games you can play, and many of you, raise your hands if you'd seen this before. Yeah, so many of you, so a third of you maybe had seen it even before you came to the class. It's unbelievable, actually, if you think about it. Why is this effective? And then we'll stop. Yeah.
Because it's catchy.
Right. What else? What does it involve? It's not. Yeah. Next to, what was your name again? Hannah. 2 over. Were you raising? Yeah. What's your name? Sarka.
Yeah, it doesn't involve young people.
Yeah, it doesn't involve young people, but that I don't think there's a kind of Pulp Fiction and, you know, Terminator, right? Those of you that know those movies know what I'm talking about. Like, one is like a really frightening kind of realistic violence, and the other is like a cartoon violence. You don't, you know. So this perturbing. It's humorous, right? There's a kind of humor here. And we'll discuss next time as well how humor can be very effectively used in counter-marketing. All right, see you next time.